The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with their usual heavy sound. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked through them for what everyone thought would be just another boring day of space politics. His simple black suit looked plain next to the fancy robes and shining armor of the alien delegates. Jake carried only a small data pad and wore the same calm expression he had shown for the past 5 years as Earth's representative. The chamber was huge and round with seats arranged in circles going up toward a dome ceiling. Hundreds of alien species sat in their assigned spots. The blue-skinned Veltar delegates whispered among themselves near the front. The tall Andromedans stood perfectly still like metal statues. The jellyfish-like Aquarians floated in their water tanks, making bubbling sounds that their translators turned into words. Chairman Zexthara sat on the highest platform in the center. His crystal body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. His forearms moved as he sorted through the day's business reports. Like most council meetings, today was supposed to cover trade disputes, mining rights, and the endless arguments about who could build colonies where. Jake walked to the small human section near the back of the chamber. Humans had been given only 12 seats out of over 3,000. Most alien species saw this as fair since humans had only been part of galactic society for 50 years. Jake had never complained about the seating. He had never complained about much of anything. The morning session dragged on as usual. The Zephyrian Empire wanted to expand their mining operations into neutral space. The Crystal Hegemony claimed the Zephyrians were breaking old treaties. 3 different species argued about shipping routes through the Andromeda sector. Jake listened quietly and took notes on his pad like he always did. During the lunch break, most delegates gathered in their species groups. The powerful aliens formed circles and made deals while eating foods from their home worlds. Jake usually sat alone or with the few human staff members who worked at the station. Today, he sat by himself near a large window that showed the stars. Outside, Captain Lisa Hayes found him there. She was the head of Terran Diplomatic Corps Security and had worked with Jake for 3 years. Lisa had short brown hair and kind eyes, but she looked worried today. "The final transport leaves in 6 hours," Lisa said quietly. "All our people are packed and ready." Jake nodded without looking away from the stars. "Good. Make sure the shipping records are clean. I want every human-owned business to show normal operations until the last minute." "What about the council session this afternoon?" Lisa asked. "I'll handle it," Jake said. "Just make sure our people get to their ship safely." The afternoon session started late because the Zephyrian delegate had eaten something that disagreed with his stomach. When everyone finally gathered, Chairman Zexthara looked annoyed and wanted to rush through the remaining business. He called on different species to present their reports and proposals. Jake waited until near the end when Chairman Zexthara asked if anyone had final statements. The human raised his hand. Most of the aliens barely looked up from their tablets and data screens. Jake had spoken maybe 20 times in 5 years and usually only to answer direct questions. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Morrison of Earth," Zexthara said in a bored voice. Jake stood up slowly. The chamber was only half full now since many delegates had left early for dinner plans. He looked around at the few hundred aliens who remained. "Honored chairman and esteemed delegates," Jake began in his usual calm voice. "I come before you today to inform the Council of a decision made by the United Earth government." Some of the aliens looked up from their screens. Jake never made long speeches, so this felt different. "Effective immediately, humanity is withdrawing from all galactic affairs. We are ending our membership in this council and closing all diplomatic relations with member species. Our trade agreements will not be renewed. Our research partnerships are terminated. Our colony worlds will become independent of council authority." The chamber grew quiet. Chairman Zexthara's crystal body flashed, bright colors which meant he was surprised or angry. "Ambassador Morrison," the chairman said, "this is highly irregular. Earth cannot simply withdraw from established treaties and agreements. There are procedures to follow." Jake looked directly at the chairman. "With respect, Chairman Zexthara, we have followed all required procedures. The withdrawal documents were filed with the council secretary 3 days ago. All legal requirements have been met." The Zephyrian delegate stood up. His purple skin turned darker when he was upset. "Humans cannot break their mining contracts on 7 worlds. My people, have invested billions of credits in those operations. Your contracts were with human companies, not with Earth directly, Jake replied. Those companies have sold their assets to local buyers and dissolved their operations. All debts have been paid in full. Delegate Vex Mirren of the Crystal Hegemony spoke next. Her voice sounded like wind chimes. The humans are responsible for maintaining 17 trading posts along the outer rim. These posts serve over 40 species. The trading posts have been turned over to local administrators, Jake said. All inventory has been purchased by regional trading companies. No services will be interrupted. More aliens were paying attention now. Council member Thisara from the Aquarian systems raised her tentacle. Human research stations have been working on projects with our scientists for decades. You cannot simply abandon ongoing research. Jake's expression never changed. All research data has been transferred to partner institutions. Any projects that cannot continue without human participation have been concluded and final reports submitted. Chairman Zexathera stood up to his full height. His crystal body was now flashing angry red patterns. This is unacceptable. Humanity has obligations to galactic society. You cannot simply walk away from your responsibilities. We are not walking away from responsibilities, Jake said quietly. We are choosing to pursue different responsibilities elsewhere. Where? Demanded the Zephyrian delegate. Where does humanity think it can go? This council represents 90% of known space. Jake smiled for the first time anyone could remember. Known to you, perhaps? The chamber erupted in angry voices and clicking sounds and electronic beeps as different species tried to talk at once. Chairman Zex Thara banged his ceremonial staff 3 times to restore order. Ambassador Morrison, the chairman said in his most official voice, I strongly advise against this course of action. Humanity will find itself isolated and vulnerable, without council protection and support. Jake gathered his datapad and stood to leave. Chairman Zexathara, honored delegates, humanity, thanks you for the opportunities you have provided over the past 50 years. We wish you well in your future endeavors. He walked toward the chamber doors as alien voices rose behind him. Just before reaching the exit, Jake stopped and turned back to face the assembly one last time. For what it's worth, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. We really did try to fit in. Then Ambassador Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chamber. The doors closed behind him with their heavy sound. Within 6 hours, every human in council space had quietly disappeared, leaving behind empty offices, clean facilities, and paid bills. They left no forwarding addresses and no emergency contacts. The council spent the rest of the day arguing about what to do, but by then, all the human ships were already gone. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and most aliens had already forgotten about them. The Galactic Council continued its daily business of trade disputes and territory arguments. Chairman Zexathara never mentioned the empty human section in the chamber. Life went on as normal until the first problems started showing up. Admiral Kresick of the Andromedan fleet was reviewing battle reports when his aide rushed into his office. The young officer's metal face showed signs of stress, which was unusual for their emotionless species. Admiral, the aide said, we have a serious problem with the defense grid around New Andromeda. Admiral Kresick looked up from his holographic displays. What kind of problem? The AI systems are failing. All of them. The targeting computers cannot lock onto enemy ships anymore. The shield generators are running random power cycles. Even the basic navigation systems are giving wrong coordinates. The Admiral stood up quickly. New Andromeda was their most important military base with over 2 million personnel. Have the technicians found the cause? That is the problem, sir. The humans designed most of our AI software. Dr. Ryan Brooks was the lead programmer on the project. Without him, our technicians cannot understand how the systems work. Admiral Kresick had met Dr. Brooks several times during the development process. The human had been quiet and helpful, always fixing problems that Andromedan engineers could not solve. Like most aliens, the Admiral had assumed the humans were just following Andromedan specifications. Now he realized the truth was more complicated. Can we contact Dr. Brooks? The Admiral asked. His aide's metal face grew dimmer. All human communication channels are dead, sir. We cannot find any trace of their ships or colonies. Meanwhile, on the mining world of Kepler-7, similar problems were developing. The automated mining robots had been working perfectly for 3 years until they suddenly started breaking down. The machines would dig for a few hours, then stop working completely. Repair crews could replace broken parts, but the robots would fail again within days. Mine supervisor Zelthon of the crystalline species called an emergency meeting with his engineering staff. The crystal being's body flashed frustrated yellow colors as he spoke to his team. These robots were designed by human engineer Kate Sullivan, Zelthon said. They worked perfectly when she was here for maintenance checks. What has changed? Chief Engineer Brickstar consulted his data tablet. The robots require specific calibration adjustments every few weeks. Kate Sullivan performed these adjustments, but she never wrote down the exact procedures. Why not? Zelthon demanded. She said the adjustments were different every time based on rock density, equipment wear, and environmental factors. She claimed it was more feeling than science. Zelthon's crystal body flashed angry red. Feeling? That is not logical. Machines operate on precise calculations. That is what we told her, Brickstar replied. But somehow her adjustments always worked while our calculated approaches fail. Similar conversations were happening across Council space. On the trade station at Proxima Junction, alien merchants were discovering how much they had depended on human mediators. The station handled trade between 12 different species, who often had cultural conflicts and misunderstandings. Station Administrator Vorthak faced angry representatives from 3 species who were threatening to cancel their trading agreements. The Zephyrians thought the Aquarians were being disrespectful during negotiations. The Aquarians believed the crystal hegemony was trying to cheat them on shipping costs. The crystal beings accused everyone else of being primitive and emotional. Where is Sam Parker? Demanded the Zephyrian trade representative. He always handled our disputes before. Vorthak's tentacles twisted nervously. Sam Parker was human. All humans left 6 months ago. Then get another mediator, the Aquarian delegate. Bubbled through her translator. We have tried, Vorthak replied. None of our diplomatic staff can resolve these conflicts. Every meeting ends in arguments. The truth was that humans had possessed an unusual talent for understanding different alien cultures. They could translate not just words but emotions and intentions between species who thought completely differently. Without human mediators, many trade relationships were falling apart. Dr. Tismek of the Aquarian Medical Institute faced an even more serious crisis. A strange disease was spreading through the outer rim colonies, affecting multiple species. The illness caused fever, confusion, and organ failure in different ways depending on the victim's biology. Dr. Tismek had worked with human Dr. Alex Chen on similar cross-species diseases before. Dr. Chen had developed treatments that worked across multiple alien biologies, something that should have been impossible given how different each species was. How did Dr. Chen create these treatments? Dr. Tismek asked her research team. He studied the genetic patterns of all affected species, replied her assistant. But his treatment formulas do not follow standard medical logic. Dr. Tismek reviewed Dr. Chen's old research notes. The human doctor had written things like, adjust dosage based on patient's emotional state, and treatment effectiveness depends on family support structure. These comments made no scientific sense to Aquarian medicine. Dr. Chen claimed that psychological factors affected physical healing across all species, the assistant continued. Our medical computers cannot process such variables. That is because psychology is not measurable, Dr. Tismek said. Treatment should be based on biological factors alone. But when they tried to recreate Dr. Chen's treatments using only biological data, the medicines failed completely. Patients continued dying while the Aquarian doctors struggled to understand how human intuition had succeeded where their logical methods could not. The problems were not limited to technology and medicine. Captain Rexelon of Council Security discovered that crime rates had increased dramatically in sectors that previously had human peacekeepers. Humans had served as police officers and security consultants on dozens of worlds, and their absence was creating chaos. Human officers had an unusual ability to predict criminal behavior, Captain Rexelon told his staff meeting. They could sense when someone was planning violence or theft before any crime occurred. "How is that possible?" asked his lieutenant. "They called it reading body language and watching for suspicious behavior," the captain replied. "But when we try to use their methods, we see nothing unusual about the same individuals." The truth was that humans could detect emotional states and intentions in other species through subtle cues that alien security forces could not perceive. Without human officers, criminals from multiple species were operating freely because alien police could not predict their actions. Even the Council's bureaucracy was feeling the impact. Human clerks and administrators had handled much of the paperwork that kept galactic government running smoothly. They had possessed an unusual talent for cutting through red tape and finding solutions to complex regulatory problems. Now simple, permit applications were taking months instead of days. Trade disputes that humans would have resolved in hours were dragging on for weeks. The efficient system that had run galactic civilization was slowly grinding to a halt without the human workers who had kept it functioning. Chairman Zex Thara noticed the growing problems but dismissed them as temporary setbacks. During a council meeting, he addressed the concerns of various alien delegates. "These minor difficulties will resolve themselves," the chairman declared. "We simply need time to adjust our procedures without human interference." But privately, Zexathara was beginning to worry. Reports of system failures and social problems were arriving daily from across council space. The humans had been involved in far more activities than anyone had realized, and their sudden absence was creating problems that no other species seemed capable of solving. Still, the chairman refused to admit that humanity's departure might have been a serious mistake. The council represented the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Surely they could solve any problems created by the loss of one primitive species. They had no idea how much worse things were about to become. 2 years had passed since humanity disappeared and the galaxy was no longer the same place. What started as small problems had grown into major crises that were affecting billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. The Galactic Council was finally beginning to understand that losing the humans might have been a terrible mistake. The Zephyrian Empire had become the most dangerous threat in known space. Without human diplomats to keep them in check, the purple-skinned warriors had conquered 3 entire star systems in the past year. Their war fleets moved from world to world, enslaving weaker species and taking whatever resources they wanted. General Vextor stood on the bridge of his flagship as it approached the peaceful world of Harmony Station. The small planet was home to the gentlefolk, a species of plant-like beings who had never developed weapons or military technology. They lived simple lives growing food and creating beautiful art that was treasured across the galaxy. "Prepare the invasion pods," General Vextor commanded his officers. "The gentlefolk will make excellent workers for our mining operations." In the past, such an attack would have been impossible. Ambassador Tony Martinez had maintained a careful balance of power that kept aggressive species like the Zephyrians from attacking peaceful ones. Tony had spent years building alliances and creating treaties that protected weaker civilizations. The Andromedan fleet would have defended Harmony Station, but their ships were all broken down with AI failures. The Crystal Hegemony had the military power to stop the Zephyrians, but they were too busy dealing with equipment problems on their own worlds. The Aquarians wanted to help, but their pacifist nature made military action difficult for them. Tony Martinez had been the one person who could have convinced all these species to work together against the Zephyrian threat. He had understood how to speak to each alien culture in ways that motivated them to act. Without him, every species was focused only on their own problems. The Zephyrian invasion of Harmony Station lasted only 6 hours. The gentlefolk had no weapons and no experience with violence. They were loaded onto transport ships and taken to work as slaves in Zephyrian mines. Their beautiful planet was stripped of resources and left as a dead rock floating in space. Meanwhile, the terraforming crisis was getting worse every day. Engineer Maria Santos had designed atmospheric processors that could turn dead worlds into garden paradises. 27 worlds had been transformed using her technology, providing homes for over 50 million colonists. but the processors were failing without human maintenance. On the world of New Eden, colonist leader Braxeth watched helplessly as his planet's sky turned from blue to gray. The oxygen levels were dropping and the carefully maintained weather patterns were becoming chaotic storms. "How much time do we have?" Braxeth asked his science team. "Perhaps 6 months before the atmosphere becomes unbreathable," replied Chief Scientist Mordek. "We must evacuate the population." "Where will we go?" Braxeth demanded. "This is our home. Our children were born here." Mordek's expression was grim. "Maria Santos designed these processors, but she never trained anyone else to maintain them. We do not understand how they work." Similar evacuations were happening on dozens of worlds. Millions of aliens were becoming refugees as their terraformed home slowly died. The engineering principles behind Maria's atmospheric processors seemed to violate known science. She had somehow created machines that could think and adapt to changing conditions, but no other species could replicate her work. The medical crisis was even more frightening. Dr. Alex Chen's treatments for cross-species diseases had prevented several major plagues over the years. Without his continued research, a new illness called the void sickness was spreading across the galaxy. The disease affected different species in horrible ways. Crystalline beings would crack and shatter. Aquarians would lose the ability to process water. Zephyrians would develop painful growths that drove them insane. No single treatment could help all the affected species. Dr. Thasmek led a team of the galaxy's best medical minds in trying to find a cure. They had been working for 8 months without success. Dr. Chen's old research notes mentioned something called empathic medicine, Dr. Thasmek told her team. He claimed that emotional connections between doctor and patient could affect healing rates. "That is not scientific," protested Dr. Krelnox from the Crystal Hegemony. "Medicine is based on biological facts, not feelings." "Yet Dr. Chen's treatments worked when ours fail," Dr. Thasmek replied. "Perhaps we do not understand all the factors involved in healing." The truth was that humans had possessed an intuitive understanding of how different alien biologies interacted. Dr. Chen could sense which treatments would work for which patients in ways that purely logical medical analysis could not predict. His medicine had been as much art as science. But the most terrifying discovery came from the Outer Rim defense stations. Captain Ron Sullivan had stumbled across something that changed everything anyone thought they knew about galactic security. Captain Sullivan was investigating why the early warning systems for Void Stalkers had gone silent. These quantum creatures from dark space were the most feared predators in the galaxy. They could phase in and out of normal reality, making them nearly impossible to detect or fight. The detection grids had been designed and maintained by human technicians who claimed they could feel when the stalkers were approaching. Other species had thought this was primitive superstition, but the systems had worked perfectly for decades. Now the stalkers were back. 3 Outer Rim colonies had been completely destroyed, their populations simply vanishing without trace. The quantum predators left behind only empty buildings and a sense of wrongness that made other aliens sick to experience. How did the humans detect these creatures? Captain Sullivan asked his science officer. Their reports mention quantum empathy and dimensional awareness, the officer replied. These terms do not appear in any of our scientific databases. Captain Sullivan reviewed the human maintenance logs for the detection systems. The technicians had written comments like, adjusted for quantum resonance fluctuations, and calibrated empathic sensors for dark space emanations. None of it made sense according to known physics. The humans were detecting threats that our science says should be impossible to detect, Captain Sullivan realized. They were protecting us from dangers we did not even know existed. The void. Stalker attacks were increasing in frequency and intensity. Without human operators who could sense the creature's approach, entire star systems were becoming hunting grounds for the quantum predators. Back on the Council homeworld, Chairman Zexthara faced angry delegates from dozens of species. The chamber that had once been filled with confident aliens making trade deals was now crowded with refugees, emergency reports, and desperate pleas for help. The situation is becoming critical, announced Delegate Morex from the Outer Rim Coalition. We have lost 7 worlds to the Stalkers and 12 more to Zephyrian conquest. Our people are dying while the Council does nothing. What would you have us do? Chairman Zexthera replied. These problems require solutions that we do not possess. Find the humans, demanded Councillor Vexmiran. Bring them back. Make them. Help us. We have tried, the chairman admitted. All our search efforts have failed. The humans have vanished completely from known space. The truth was that the Council had been searching for humanity for over a year without finding any trace of their ships, colonies, or technology. It was as if 50 billion humans had simply ceased to exist. Then we are doomed, said Delegate Morex quietly. The chamber fell silent as the full weight of their situation became clear. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations were facing problems they could not solve, threats they could not detect, and enemies they could not defeat. The primitive humans they had dismissed as unimportant had been the only thing standing between galactic civilization and complete collapse. Chairman Zexthera looked out at the desperate faces of his fellow aliens and realized they had made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had let humanity walk away, and now the galaxy was paying the price for their arrogance. But finding the humans was proving impossible, and time was running out for everyone. 5 years had passed since humanity vanished, and the Galactic Council was desperate enough to try anything. The crisis had grown beyond anyone's worst nightmares. Entire sectors of space were now empty wastelands where civilizations had once thrived. The council that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years was falling apart. Councillor Vexmiran of the Crystalline Hegemony stood before the emergency assembly with a proposal that would have been unthinkable just years before. Her crystal body flickered with determination as she addressed the few dozen delegates who remained. Most species had withdrawn from the council to focus on protecting their own surviving worlds. We must launch the largest search operation in galactic history, Vexmiran announced. Every available ship, every sensor array, every detection system must be used to find humanity. Chairman Zexthara looked older and dimmer than before. The constant stress of the galactic crisis had taken its toll on his crystal structure. Councillor Vexmiran, we have been searching for years without success. What makes you think a larger operation will succeed where smaller ones have failed? Because we have not been looking in the right places, Vexmiran replied. We have been searching known space, following established trade routes and familiar star systems. But what if the humans went somewhere we have never explored? Admiral Kresic of the Andromedans supported the proposal despite his failing fleet. Most of his ships were barely functional, but he was willing to commit what remained to the search effort. The Andromedan fleet will contribute 12 vessels to this operation, the Admiral announced. Our AI systems may be failing, but our long-range sensors still function. The search fleet that assembled over the next month was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from every remaining Council species joined the effort. Crystal Hegemony science vessels with their advanced detection equipment. Aquarian exploration ships designed for long journeys. Even some Zephyrian military vessels participated, though their motives were questionable. Captain Ron Sullivan volunteered to lead the search mission aboard his ship, the Starseeker. The veteran explorer had spent decades mapping unknown regions of space and was considered the best choice for such a dangerous mission. We will search beyond the galactic rim, Captain Sullivan told his mixed species crew. If the humans left known space completely, that is where we are most likely to find traces of their passage. The search fleet spread out across a region of space that had never been thoroughly explored. They found empty star systems, dead worlds, and strange phenomena that defied explanation. But for weeks, they found no sign of humanity. Then Captain Sullivan's ship detected something impossible near the edge of a collapsed star system. Long-range sensors picked up energy signatures that matched human technology, but the readings were coming from empty space. There is nothing there, reported his science officer. Our visual sensors show only vacuum and cosmic dust. But the energy readings are definitely human, Sullivan insisted. Take us closer, but be ready to retreat if anything goes wrong. As the Starseeker approached the source of the readings, something extraordinary happened. Space itself seemed to shimmer and bend, revealing the outline of a massive structure that had been completely invisible moments before. "It appears to be some kind of research station," the science officer said in amazement. "But it exists in a dimensional phase that our sensors can barely detect." The station was clearly of human design, but incorporated technologies that seemed centuries ahead of anything in Council space. It floated in what appeared to be a pocket of folded space-time, hidden from normal detection methods. "Are there any life signs?" Captain Sullivan asked. "The station appears to be automated," came the reply, "but there are data storage systems that might contain information about where the humans went. The away team that boarded the station found wonders beyond their imagination. The research labs contained experiments in dimensional manipulation, consciousness transfer, and something called quantum empathy that allowed direct emotional connection between different species. In the central computer core, they discovered the truth about humanity's hidden capabilities. The research logs revealed that humans had been secretly developing technologies for decades that made them capable of traveling between dimensions, manipulating space-time, and even transferring their consciousness into pure energy. But the most shocking discovery was a series of automated defense networks that the station's computers revealed had been protecting the galaxy from threats that no one else even knew existed. Ancient enemy civilizations from dark space, quantum predators that fed on reality itself, and dimensional parasites that could consume entire star systems. The humans were fighting a secret war, Captain Sullivan realized as he read through the data files. They were protecting all of us from enemies we never knew existed. The station's main computer activated when it detected the away team's presence. A holographic message appeared showing Admiral Beth Morrison, Jake Morrison's sister and commander of the human Exodus fleet. "If you are seeing this message, it means our automated systems have determined that galactic civilization is in serious danger," the hologram said. "We left this station as a final gift to the species we once called friends." Admiral Morrison's image looked directly at Captain Sullivan with sad but determined eyes. "We offered partnership, and you chose supremacy. We offered protection, and you chose pride. The galaxy belongs to you now, and we hope you can survive what is coming without us." The hologram gestured to the research data surrounding them. These files contain detailed information about 14 different existential threats that we have been quietly managing or preparing to face. Without human intervention, you have perhaps 10 years before complete galactic collapse. Captain, Sullivan's crew worked frantically to download as much information as possible from the station's computers. They found plans for defensive technologies that could stop the Void Stalkers, medical treatments that could cure the spreading plagues, and engineering specifications for repairing the failing terraforming systems. But every piece of human technology required something called quantum empathy to operate properly. The humans had developed the ability to feel and understand the quantum connections between all living things. This ability allowed them to work with technologies and solve problems that seemed impossible to other species. "Can we learn these abilities?" Captain Sullivan asked the station's computer. "Quantum empathy cannot be taught through traditional methods," the computer replied. "It requires a fundamental change in how consciousness perceives reality. Most species lack the neural flexibility to develop these capabilities." The final shock came when the station's sensors detected approaching threats from dark space. The automated defenses that humans had left behind were failing one by one, and hostile forces that had been held back for decades were beginning to move toward inhabited space. "The quantum barriers are collapsing," the computer warned. Estimated time until first dark space incursion, 18 months. Captain Sullivan realized they were looking at the end of galactic civilization. Without the humans to maintain the defenses, maintain the technologies, and solve the impossible problems, every species in known space was doomed. The search team returned to Council space with the terrible knowledge they had gained. The data from the human station was shared with every surviving government, but the news only made the situation seem more hopeless. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for galactic civilization, while secretly protecting it from threats that would have destroyed it long ago. They had become something greater than any other species could understand, and they had chosen to take their gifts and go somewhere else. The galaxy was on its own now, facing enemies it could not see, problems it could not solve, and a future it was not prepared to handle. The Council had gotten exactly what it thought it wanted: a galaxy without human interference. The question now was whether any of them would survive to see what came next. 10 years had passed since humanity left without a word, and the galaxy was dying. The great council chamber that had once housed thousands of proud delegates now looked like a refugee camp. Emergency shelters lined the walls where alien survivors, huddled together, sharing the last resources from their destroyed worlds. Chairman Zexathara stood at the center of the ruined chamber, his crystal body cracked and dim from years of constant crisis. Around him sat the remaining representatives of what had once been the most powerful civilizations in known space. The Andromedan fleet existed only on paper now. The crystal hegemony controlled just 3 worlds instead of 300. The Aquarian systems had been reduced to a handful of underwater cities on distant moons. The final report from the Outer Rim Coalition has arrived, Chairman Zexathara announced to the small group of survivors. His voice carried no authority anymore, only exhaustion and despair. Counselor Vexmiran read from her data tablet with shaking crystal appendages. 17 more star systems have been consumed by the Voidstalkers in the past month. The quantum plague has reached the inner colonies. The Zephyrian Empire collapsed completely when their homeworld was destroyed by dimensional parasites they tried to enslave. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The Zephyrians had been so focused on conquering other species that they never noticed the real threats approaching from dark space. When the dimensional parasites attacked, the purple-skinned warriors found their weapons useless against enemies that existed partially outside normal reality. "What about the evacuation efforts?" asked Admiral Kresic, though his title meant nothing now that the Andromedan fleet consisted of 12 broken ships. "The transportation networks are failing," Vexmiran replied. "Without human maintenance, the jump gates are becoming unstable. 3 refugee ships were lost yesterday when a gate collapsed during transit." Dr. Thysemek floated in her emergency water tank, her tentacles moving weakly. The Aquarian medical officer had been trying to treat plague victims for years, but the diseases kept mutating faster than she could develop cures. "The human research station data has been helpful," Dr. Thysemek reported. "But we cannot operate their medical equipment without quantum empathy. Every treatment we try fails because we lack the intuitive understanding that humans possess naturally." Captain Ron Sullivan entered the chamber carrying a communication device that was broadcasting static. He had been leading the desperate search for any remaining trace of humanity. But 10 years of searching had produced nothing but empty space and dead technology. "We received something," Captain Sullivan announced. "It is not much, but it appears to be a message probe." Every alien in the chamber turned to look at him with hope in their eyes. Any contact with humanity might offer a chance for salvation, even if it was just a message. "The probe was found drifting near the edge of the galaxy," Captain Sullivan continued. "It contains a recorded message from Admiral Beth Morrison." A holographic projector activated in the center of the chamber, showing the image of a middle-aged, human woman in a simple uniform. Admiral Morrison looked directly at the camera with calm, sad eyes. "If you are receiving this message, it means the automated systems we left behind have determined that galactic civilization is approaching final collapse," Admiral Morrison said. "We programmed this probe to be released only when the situation became truly desperate." Chairman Zexathara leaned forward, his cracked crystal body reflecting the hologram's light. "She knew this would happen. They knew we would fail." "Admiral," Morrison's message continued, "we want you to understand that we did not leave out of anger or spite. We left because we realized that our presence was preventing your species from growing and learning on your own. You had become dependent on human solutions to human-detected problems." The hologram gestured to data files that appeared alongside her image. "For 50 years we quietly solved crises that you never knew existed. We detected threats that your science said were impossible. We prevented wars that would have destroyed billions of lives. We maintained technologies that your species could not understand." Dr. Thysemek's tentacles twisted in recognition. "They were protecting us from ourselves as well as from external threats. The quantum empathy that made our technology possible is not just a human ability, Admiral Morrison explained. Every species has the potential to develop this capability, but only through facing impossible challenges and learning to think beyond the limitations of pure logic. The message showed images of the hidden war that humanity had been fighting, massive battles against dark space entities that existed outside normal reality, diplomatic missions to hostile dimensions where entire civilizations of energy beings plotted the destruction of physical matter, research stations that monitored threats from parallel universes where different laws of physics allowed the existence of unimaginable dangers. We became the galaxy's immune system, Admiral Morrison said. But immune systems can become too strong, preventing the natural development of resistance in the organisms they protect. We realized that our help was making you weaker, not stronger. Captain Sullivan watched the message with growing understanding. They left to force us to grow up, to become capable of protecting ourselves. The hologram showed the final revelation. Humans had not simply left the galaxy. They had evolved beyond the need for physical existence in normal space-time. They had become beings of pure consciousness that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "We are still here, Admiral," Morrison said with a slight smile. "We exist in the spaces between realities, in the quantum foam that underlies all existence. We can see everything that happens in normal space, but we cannot directly interfere anymore." The message continued, with the most important information of all. "The threats you face now are real and dangerous, but they are not impossible to defeat. The key is learning to work together across species boundaries, developing the quantum empathy that allows true understanding between different forms of consciousness. Your species must learn to feel what others feel, to think in ways that transcend your individual limitations. The technologies we left behind will work when you develop the ability to operate them together as a unified galactic consciousness." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. They had graduated to a higher form of existence while leaving behind the tools needed for other species to eventually follow the same path. "The choice is yours," Admiral Morrison concluded. "You can continue to compete and fight among yourselves until the dark space entities consume everything you have built, or you can learn to truly cooperate, developing the abilities needed to defend your home and eventually join us in the spaces beyond normal reality." The hologram flickered and faded, leaving the surviving aliens to contemplate their situation. They faced extinction if they continued their old ways of thinking, but potential transcendence if they could learn to work together as humanity had tried to teach them. Chairman Zexthara looked around the chamber at representatives of species that had been enemies for centuries. Crystals and water dwellers, metal beings and gas cloud entities, all facing the same choice between evolution and extinction. "Perhaps," the chairman said slowly, "it is time we learned to listen to each other the way the humans listened to all of us." In the spaces between dimensions, humanity watched and waited to see if their former friends could grow beyond the limitations that had once defined them. The galaxy's future depended on whether its remaining inhabitants could develop the wisdom to become worthy of the inheritance that had been left for them. The test had begun, and only time would tell if anyone would survive to pass it.